All right, everybody, welcome to this third and final Being a Visual Studio Champ event. It's been a joy to have been moderator on these events, and today is the final one. This time we will have focus on tips and tricks about the tools on top of Visual Studio, like ReSharper and nCrunch and stuff like that. First, a big thank you to our sponsors, Microsoft, Blue Fragments, and .NET Consultants. Without you, we couldn't have events like these, so a big thank you for that. And to share the best tips and tricks about tools on top of Visual Studio, I have two really good friends and really bright developers with me today. It is Kasper Birkelund and Ulrik Bodentin. Kasper is an independent software developer and really good architect. And Ulrik is a senior consultant, software engineer, at Danske Bank. Before we start, I want to share something really great with you. So we have made a deal with JetBrains, and they have sponsored a 1-year .ultimate subscription to one of you listeners. All you need to do to put your name in the hat, so to speak, is share your very best tip or trick for Visual Studio or ReSharper or whatever that makes you productive in your everyday, and send it to win@bluefragments.com. And then by the end of tomorrow, we will draw a winner and announce the winner on Friday. It is a really great opportunity to win this great subscription. So please share your tip or trick with us. And I will, of course, also make sure to share all of the tips and tricks that we get so that everybody can benefit from that. So back to today's topic. With me, as mentioned, we have Kasper and Ulrik. And first and foremost, I want to give the word to you, Kasper, and after that, I will give it to you, Ulrik. So with that and no additional delays, Kasper, the scene is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I wanted to talk a bit about ReSharper. And even though Thomas just said that we have a good price from JetBrains, I have absolutely no relation to JetBrains. I'm going to say a lot of awesome things about it, but I really don't care if you use the tool or not. So I don't have anything in promotional regards. So that's it. When I discussed with Thomas that I should do this talk, I was a bit concerned because I haven't been using other than ReSharper for many, many years, which actually means that I'm not really sure, I was not really sure what the latest version of Visual Studio could do compared to ReSharper. A lot of the features that ReSharper has been able to do the last many years, Visual Studio has been catching up on. So luckily I found this list made by JetBrains, but I guess it's correct. So with a baseline in this list, I have pulled out a lot of features that I believe is not existing in Visual Studio. I'm also going to show a few other tips, but what is common for all of these will be that they are not in the free version of Visual Studio. So that will be tips that you can only use if you are paying for Visual Studio. By the way, this is a good page if you're in doubt if ReSharper is a good product for you. Here will be a lot of comparisons. What can be done in Visual Studio, what can be done in ReSharper, what can be done better, and what is lagging. Surprisingly, ReSharper is not lagging a lot of features that did this list. So let's open Visual Studio and do some demos. The first thing I actually wanted to show is actually not really a ReSharper trick, but it's actually a trick that I have figured out that not too many people know about. So that I want to share with you. It's called code clones. It's in the enterprise version of Visual Studio. So again, if you're using the free version, you won't have this feature. But if you do, you should pay attention. I have opened here, this is just a random solution. I think this is a Microsoft demo app called eShop on Dapper. Doesn't really matter. It's just an application. And I want to check if it has any code clones. And code clones has many similarities with code duplication, but it's not the same. And I will show you that. So I get this menu item called Analyze Solution for code clones. And now I'm curious if it works fast or not. Now I'm running Teams on top. It usually runs really fast. And what it shows me is that it found a few code clones. It found one exact match, and an exact match is basically the same as a duplication. And many other tools would be able to find this one. But what is more interesting is this medium matches. Here it tells me that in this particular class, in this particular line span, I have a lot of code. And what it has figured out is that that code is very, very similar to this code in this particular file. And what I have done is I have pulled it out in a compare tool. So what you can see here is that one code chunk is on the left, the other on the right, and they're very similar, but there are some things that are not the same. So it's not a code duplicate, and a regular code duplication tool cannot find it. You can then argue that it could find the things in the middle, but that could also be very similar, but not 100% similar or 100% equal. So here you can see there are a few things that it calls a different method with a different argument. The same here. So it's not a duplicate, but it's definitely a candidate for pulling out and reuse the code. That's a really, really awesome feature. That means that it's intelligent. It will also be able to figure out if I have a for each loop in one part of my code and a for loop in another part of the code that does the same. It will know it's not completely the same digits or it's the same characters, but the intent is definitely the same. So that was the first trick. You need to pay for this one, but it will really make some good analysis through your code, and it runs quite fast. No clue how they do it. So let's close this one. So going to ReSharper. When you open a solution for the first time, it's really nice to be able to see how are the projects related, because usually you see a lot of projects. Here I made it easy for you, but you get the X number of projects and how do they relate. If you know how they relate, it will make your reasoning about the code a lot easier. So ReSharper provides this called show project dependency diagram. And it's actually really, really simple. But on large code bases or with many projects, this one really, really fast makes it possible for you to see how things relate. I can tick on and off specific groups. If I have solution folders, it will automatically be added. So I can say this particular solution folder, maybe all the tests I don't care about for now. So now really easy get an overview of my solution. So ReSharper helps in a few ways. It helps, I try to group it here on read and explore. And a lot of the time you spend in your code base, you usually use on reading or exploring the code. So that's actually, to me, the most important one. And I pulled out one feature that I think rules them all. It's the search feature. They have made a search functionality that is really, really awesome. It's called Search Everywhere. And this will search in all kind of files, all kind of syntaxes, all kind of functionality, and it will do it fuzzy. And fuzzy means that I've written it here with my comment. If I have something that is called a person calculator, but I'm not really sure about the name, then I can actually type some part of it that is close to, and ReSharper will do a fuzzy search, meaning that it will try to figure out words that have the same sound or sound similar or close. So now I typed it wrong, but it will still find it. And it's actually really, really intelligent. I can also just type PC, which are the capital letters, and it will also just figure out what it could be. It says this is the first candidate. Maybe you think if it will be program.cs, and then it kind of rank its suggestions. This feature I use a lot of the time. It can just by keyboard shortcuts, it can jump me through the entire solution in no time, and it performs awesomely. So I'm really happy with this feature, and I actually tried the same in Visual Studio, and it's not the same. It's not the same speed, and it's not guessing as good as this one, according to me. So that is worth trying.
So Kasper, a quick question. We got a question from Henrik asking if the code clone have a lower threshold than, or does the code clone have a lower threshold? For example, does it only compare code if it contains some complexity or a certain number of lines long?
It's a really good question. I haven't been able to figure out how it's configured, because sometimes you could say that in duplication, you usually have a threshold of, let's say, 5 or 7 lines. This one is completely built into Visual Studio, and I haven't been able to find any way of configuring it, really unfortunately, because with a little bit of configuration, you would have been able to power it up even more. And I haven't been able to figure out how you can call it from command line, because it could be a cool build step that you will be warned if some code clones are entering your code base. I haven't been able to figure out how that could be possible, but it would surprise me if it's not possible.
Okay.
But if it's a Visual Studio feature, then I guess it cannot be done just from Roslyn. Then it's somehow built in. Then it should know that you're paying for the product, so it cannot just be a free thing running on the build server. So that said, I haven't been diving a lot into it. So maybe Google can help. Cool. ReSharper is great at generating code. So what I want to show you is how I usually generate some code. And now I just realized that I'm sitting on my laptop and not on my regular keyboard, so I need to figure out. Okay, let's do it with the mouse then. I will. That will ruin the demo a bit, but it's of course also possible without a keyboard. So what I want to do here is I have a class with a lot of arguments that I just wrote, and I want to have all the properties auto-generated. So ReSharper will actually help me. Would I prefer just a private setter, or the setter and getter, or will I do it one way or the other? So I choose that I want to create all the properties with a private getter. And then I can actually decide to have this class changed to a record, because it actually would be a lot smaller code if I can do it as a record. So now it changes it to a record. And now immediately ReSharper sees that all this code is redundant. So look at this. Convert to primary constructor. Boof. Just with a little detour that I didn't have to do, but I just wanted to do it to show you how it's done. Then I have one line of code with all things done. I could also just, if I had preferred a class, I could just stop on that step. So generating code, generating properties is really awesome. Now it has some features to generate all kind of code that developers usually hate to write, especially if they have their own opinion of how it should be written. So now let's see. No, it doesn't work. What I can do here is that the rest of my demos doesn't require this shortcut. So, but what I can do here is that I can actually generate equality members. So if I want to have an equality equal method overridden that will take these two parameters into consideration, it will automatically generate an equals method and a getHashCode method that will take these two values into consideration. So that is actually very cool. Instead of I have to write my own, if this is null and that is not null, but this is not null and the other one ID is equal to, it will be a lot of code that I hate to write. It will be very simply written by ReSharper. Okay, let's go to some refactorings. Let's say I have some code in this file that I want to, these methods should not be in this file. They should actually be in this file. Then I copy the code, or maybe I should clip it, paste it in here. And of course, this doesn't work out of the box because there are some namespaces missing. But what ReSharper asks me is, should I just figure the missing namespaces out? That is done. And this doesn't help me with two namespaces too much. But imagine that you're copying big chunks of code from one file to the other. Then ReSharper will immediately import all needed namespaces. Awesome feature. Imagine that you would have to add a new parameter. Okay, I have created a method here. Now it should have a new argument. And this could be really called from 100 places in the code. For the demo purpose, it's only one called here. But let's say that it was called from 100 places. Then we can actually say maybe int age, apply signature. And then ReSharper ask me, should I just use a default value? Should I just leave it? That means I will get a compile error because maybe I want to fix it myself on every location. Should I use a default value? should I resolve with a call tree and figure that out? Haven't tried using that one. Or should I use a hard-coded value? So that is really good if you have cascades of things that you need to change. Should we just make it buff? That int age, and then I will get a to do, and it's really easy for me to see how many places I need to do before it compiles. Add type constraint. This is a feature where ReSharper helps, because this code, there's actually nothing wrong with the code. But it says something wrong with this type constraint here. And it can be difficult for me to just figure out what is wrong. I can go into the class and try to read it out. But actually ReSharper can very easily tell me that I need a type constraint. So I actually don't need to think too much. I don't need to analyze. I can just switch off my brain and let ReSharper do the import. And then I can verify that it looks okay to me. In this case, it does. Boolean rewrites is actually really great as well. Consider I have this. Just a sec, I will remove these annoying lines. So let's say I have a little complex if statement here. That is can be a bit annoying to read, and you can imagine that it could be fairly more complex. ReSharper tries to do Boolean algebra to make a more easy way of putting this. It says what you just wrote is actually the same as this one, and it has tons of algorithms to rewrite things here. So this becomes, at least to me, easier to read. It's good at swapping the negation, so it will be easier to read. And what you know is that if ReSharper does it, it does it from a mathematic algorithm, so it will be unlikely that it causes a bug to occur. If you need to calculate this in your head, it will likely cause an error. Hopefully you have unit test, but if you don't, it's good to use. Check namespace. ReSharper just figured out that blah, blah, blah is likely not the namespace I want because I am in this folder here. So this is the correct namespace according to my folder. Very easily fixed. Then it can change it to the new C# 10 feature where it wants it can do file scoped namespaces. And what I can do as well is that I can move usings to global using. That's also the new C# 10 feature. I don't really need to think too much. It will immediately create a global using with the namespace that I just addressed. Okay. Then I have a little link rewrite example. Here, ReSharper has detected that this could be written in a link style. There's nothing wrong with doing it for each statement, but sometimes link is easier to read. So ReSharper has figured out that the pattern I just wrote in a for each loop can be rewritten as an aggregate. And somebody thinks that this is easier to read. Somebody thinks this is more imperative and easier to read. but you get the choice. And you don't have to do the conversion yourself. So that's also and it works with really complex statements as well, because this is good for demo purposes because it's quite simple. But imagine that you have a way larger algorithm, then that will be solved. A simple thing as if you have done some POC code, maybe you have been doing a lot of inline classes, because sometimes it's easier if you're just trying to think up an architecture. Then you get a lot of classes in your file. And then we can just ask ReSharper to put everything into matching files. And poof, we have the files correctly named. And that can actually also be done on solution level. So it will correct if you have files that are not matching, where the class name is not matching the file name, or if you have any files where you have more types that you don't want to have. Okay, I can see the time is running. Multiple yields. This is a problem that I see a lot on the code I review, that you get in an IEnumerable of string, and then you try to access this enumerable multiple times. And that will cause the enumerable to yield more times. And it could be that it was a database called this, then it will call the database one time when I count it, and one time when I loop over it. ReSharper has detected that, and it tells me maybe you just want to have it enumerated once. So what I have here is that it will enumerate it to an array immediately, and then I can access it multiple times, because then it will be loaded into memory. And what is really cool is that you have these options solution-wide. And that means that if here I am using the var keyword, and personally I don't like that keyword, so I can say specify the type explicitly, and then I can say, by the way, do it for all occurrences in the method, in the file, the project, or in the solution, or in the folder. Usually you also have the method level here, but you don't here. And that means that if I just say it, just check the entire project, I want var to be replaced by an explicitly typed. Poof. Then it has gone through my entire project and corrected this. And that's really, you need to review your stuff, because maybe you change some auto-generated code or something like that. But it's a cool feature to have.
Kasper, time is flying. So a question regarding the last demo you just showed here with the replace solution-wide. Is that just for when you replace something like strings, or is there also other things where you have the opportunity to do things solution-wide instead of just?
But almost in everywhere. So here it in my previous demo, it says, do I want to change an if statement to a switch statement? And then again, I can do it for the file, and again do. So all feature ReSharper has in this refactoring category, you can just complete on multiple levels.
Nice. Kasper, do you have a final demo you want to share, or tip you want to share?
Yep, I had a lot, so I will prioritize one. I will then maybe take the next one.
Mm-hmm.
and leave all the tooling behind. Then we can see if we have more time in the end. If I have a method here, or this is a constructor that takes a lot of arguments, then developers don't want to change this because they just keep on adding arguments. And then I wrote we should look in main. So let's look in main. So here I just use the parameter, transform parameters equals blah, 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 blah. But maybe I want to make an object out of this. If I right click here, and then I will find refactor, convert, transform parameters. Something with the screen resolution that is not optimal here. Then it says, which parameters do we want to address? Then I say, just take all of them, make a new class with auto properties, and just call it in class name. Or whatever. Give it a good name.
Yeah.
Next. And then what it does is that it actually created this class and it did all the refactorings. So now this takes the class that I could have done myself. But here we get the refactoring, so it will have the new class out of the box. So now in the future, I can just edit this in class name and do the refactoring there. So now we only have one argument from this class. So then I can do the transformation and facading or whatever I want to do on another level. That gives me a lot fewer code changes.
Cool. All right, Kasper, that was a lot of tips and tricks regarding ReSharper. I have a lot of questions for you, but I will save them for the end. Instead, what I want to do is give the word to you, Ulrik, and also give the screen sharing to you. So give it away. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. So I hope you should be seeing my screen now. So I have a few different things I would like to touch upon today. First of all, I think it was some super nice demos you showed about ReSharper, Kasper. And I'm also a really huge fan of ReSharper. So I'd just like to show a couple of more refactorings that I have at hand and are ready with the code I have written here. And one thing where I think ReSharper really excels is that not only does it have all these super nice refactorings, but a lot of the refactorings are also often they're often updated and they're using the newer code styles we have in C#, for example. So a very simple feature from ReSharper is we have some templates. So if I, for example, use the normal class template that I get from Visual Studio out of the box, I would have this older style of a class. So I have some usings immediately, and also I have a namespace with brackets. But in the new version of, I believe it's C#10 maybe, we've gotten these namespaces where you don't need the brackets around them. And if I, for example, use the templates from ReSharper to create a class, I actually do get a class that has no usings. It's super nice and clean, and it uses the new namespace style. And that's one place where I think ReSharper is really powerful, and JetBrains does a good job in always keeping it up to date. So that's a thing I personally use a lot. Besides of that, they also have some, of course, some of the refactorings you also show, but they also have this convert to switch expression. And again, switch expressions are part of the newer versions of the C# language, and I think ReSharper does such a great job in helping me write code with all the newest features. So as you already demonstrated, we can do it on the method level, and we can convert it on the file, project, and solution-wide level. But for this case, I just want to do it only here on the method level. So in general, I think that's a super nice feature. Also, one thing I have very often found myself doing is making small, you could say, refactoring. Or when I refactor code, I once in a while miss some minor things. One thing you can see here is that ReSharper in the top right corner actually highlights that I have one warning in my code. And if I look at it up here, it actually highlights that the namespace is off. So what it turns out to be is actually, here I have the namespace service. And if I look into my project folders here, I can see that under integrations, my folder is actually called services. And what I did was I added a typo originally, so I only created this folder called service. But then I wanted to rename it, and for some reason I didn't update all my relevant classes for this one. So again, ReSharper does a fantastic job in keeping me super productive and not caring too much about doing all these things manually. So I could just go in here and click adjust namespaces in solution, and it actually adjusts the namespace not only in the files that are affected, but it also adjusts namespaces in the file that uses these files. So, so all the usings I have should also now be corrected to be services instead of service. I think these are some very easy to use and low practical features that, in my opinion, really makes ReSharper a super powerful tool. The last thing I just want to show regarding ReSharper is that it also comes with a super powerful decompiler. And oftentimes I find myself using NuGet packages. It could be NuGet packages from a third party, but it could also be my own NuGet packages I use to share code in between my projects. And in these cases, I find the ReSharper decompiler particularly powerful because just out of the box, I have a plain vanilla ReSharper version installed here. And just out of the box, I can just hit F12. Whoops, that was my own method, so maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense. But for example, here I have a framework method for add Swagger generation, and I can just hit the F12 button, and it will actually take me into a decompiled version of the Swagger extensions method. And this can be super powerful if I have multiple or if I have like shared code in smaller NuGet packages, and I want to analyze what's going on internally in a NuGet package. So use this feature a lot when I'm working with distributed systems, for example. Yes. So that was just a few extra tips and tricks I really wanted to share.
Ulrik, a quick question regarding the decompiling, because I guess somehow it must it needs to get the debug information or something like that as part of the NuGet package, right? To be able to do that.
Yes, supposedly yes. So it would probably use some of the symbols to decompile the code. I think sometimes if the NuGet package is publicly available or the source code is, they also use that somehow. But again, I'm not super deep on how it works internally.
That would be awesome if it did that. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah. So that was a bit about ReSharper and how I use some minor features in my daily work. One other tool I really wanted to share a few tips and tricks about is a tool I only recently discovered myself. So I'm fairly new to using it, but it's a tool called nCrunch. And what nCrunch is, it's like it's a continuous testing tool, you could say. And it goes really well together with if you do, for example, test-driven development. So you might have noticed I have a few green dots out here, and that is some of the nCrunch integration within Visual Studio. Visual Studio Enterprise also comes with a live unit test runner. But where Visual Studio and nCrunch differs a bit is that first and foremost, you can use nCrunch together with Visual Studio Pro, for example, or Professional. So you don't need any specific version of Visual Studio to utilize it. Besides of that, nCrunch has a very high focus on performance. So in general, nCrunch really performs well and runs blazingly fast. So I was actually quite impressed when I worked with it the first time. Yeah, that's one of their main focuses, is to make sure you don't feel that extra overhead of having this separate unit test runner. Internally, nCrunch works by creating a separate workspace, they call it. So I have opened a folder here of a workspace from nCrunch. So the default location will be here in the app data local. But in here, what nCrunch does is that it separates all your projects into smaller chunks. So even though you might have a full solution, nCrunch often tries to run this single test project you're running as a standalone as fast as possible. And that is to optimize the performance as much as possible. So yeah, if you investigate a bit in the bin and object folders, you would see all the reference assemblies and stuff like that. But that is one of their ways to optimize the performance as much as possible. But how, if I use nCrunch in a practical example, I get very instant feedback, and I'm sharing my screen and has camera on and stuff like that. So I hope the performance here is as great as I've seen earlier. But yeah, it seems like that. So you might have noticed that I had only green dots out here, which means all my tests were passing before I modified something. But let's imagine I for some reason are doing a refactoring, and I'm tampering a bit around here with my switch statement. So let's say, for example, I want to change the state machine here to call feed async instead of walk async on the doc handler. And I don't know why all this code became around docs. When I did all this and prepared for the presentation, I couldn't really think of any good concepts. So it became a small doc state machine. But yeah, that's the domain we're working in here. But yeah, as soon as I hit the enter button, we can see out here on the left that nCrunch actually immediately gives me a response on the fact that I broke some tests. So what you might see out here in the test runner is that if I just go back to walk async again, you can see immediately it runs all the relevant tests, and you can configure how nCrunch runs. Right now I have configured it to rerun all unit tests whenever I have some code changes, but you could also configure it to only run the impacted tests when you do code changes. So yes, if I just revert a bit back to where my test failed here, I can actually also utilize some keyboard features from nCrunch to easily navigate to these tests. So right now, if I hit Control R, Control 7, it will take me immediately to the test that failed. And if, let's say, for example, I made multiple tests fail, so let's say I also modified this one. So now we can see I have 2 failing tests out here. If I click Control R7, it will first take me to the first test that failed. And if I click it again, it will take me to the next one. So nCrunch really has a lot of navigation features, which allow me to easily navigate between my solution and handle all the failing tests. And I think that's super cool from a productivity perspective, because writing unit tests is a really big part of my day. So it's important for me to be as productive as possible also when we talk about unit tests. Pardon me for a second. Yeah. Besides of just being a cool tool, which allows me to work with unit testing in this continuous manner, nCrunch also has some analysis tools that can be quite useful, in my opinion. One thing is they have the metrics, and I'm not myself a big metric guy. I personally think you can measure code quality on a lot of other things than only just metrics, like code coverage, for example. But oftentimes it can still give you an indication of do you have enough tests? Are there any areas you need to add some more tests and stuff like that? So we can use this nCrunch metrics window to analyze which projects did I actually cover super well, and which I may not have covered super well. And again, this metrics window just runs on the fly. I don't have to explicitly tell nCrunch to run these metrics. So it's just something I get for free or out of the box as soon as I install and utilize nCrunch. And yeah, besides code coverage, it also has some other metrics that ties well into how they calculate the code metrics. But it's kind of obvious here that I have 2 layers that would need a few additional unit tests if this was a system I would go to production with. The very last nCrunch feature I would like to show is what they call hotspots. And hotspots is a way for me to, again, analyze some of my code and figure out where do I actually spend the time when I execute my tests. So for this project, I have mainly only made unit tests, and there are no like external services, no network calls or anything. So I don't have in particular a lot of hotspots. They are actually mainly in my test setup and how I do the setup of the dependencies and stuff like that. But this can actually be quite useful to analyze if I have any particular areas in my code or somewhere around where I would need to have an extra look, or maybe consider doing some performance optimizations. So yeah, I think that was what I had to showcase today.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome, Ulrik. Thank you for that. So one question that came to mind was that in one of the previous events, we saw that it was possible to have multiple instances of Visual Studio running, and I thought that could it be possible to have like one instance of Visual Studio running where you have nCrunch enabled and one where you don't have it? Because I guess that could also be times when you start up on a new project where you might not want to have nCrunch enabled. So you could have like 2 different instances, one where you bug fix and one where you maybe say, okay, I'm in the early stages of the development.
Yes, that's a really good question. Yes, it is possible to disable nCrunch. I will just reshare my screen again. So down here in the right corner, you have the nCrunch menu. And if you right click on that one, you have the possibility to disable it. I work on some older .NET Framework projects where I have some issues with actually running nCrunch. So I mainly use it on a few of the projects where I can easily run it. But I also have a few projects where I cannot use it. So I have the tool installed, but yeah, disable and enable for some of them.
Yeah. Okay. And And a question from Henrik asking, is it possible to add ignore attributes, ensuring that nCrunch ignores long-running tests, for example?
Yes. I have personally mostly used nCrunch together with NUnit, but you can mark your tests as, for example, explicit, and that would mean that nCrunch skips them. So nCrunch is not a unit testing framework in itself. It's just a unit test runner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for that. So one thing that of course comes to mind when you ask me regarding ReSharper is of course actually the warning that you got, Kasper, in your Visual Studio saying, I think it said Visual Studio stopped responding for 8 seconds. Disabling the extension JetBrains ReSharper might help. And I guess that is the long discussion that has been throughout the years, right? Will the extension slow down Visual Studio in a way that you're not as productive as if you didn't have it, compared to if you have it enabled? All of the features that you get from ReSharper, will that weigh up the performance degrade? So what do you think about that?
I get sometimes I get this little warning, but it never bothers me because sometimes it pops up definitely, and but it never really stops, and all the features that I get, and I get this little Copilot running on my side, is definitely worth it. In the past, it was really a pain, but the last 4 years it has been neglectable, the pain, and I'm not running on the very fastest laptop ever, and it still runs really smooth and really fast. Also on large project, of course, large is difficult to define, but it works also on big projects that is not Hello World. So I'm really happy with the trade-off.
Yeah, I would say from what you personally, I'm not a ReSharper guy. I'm more of a Visual Studio to the bone kind of guy. But from what you showed today, that there wasn't any sign of Visual Studio hanging based on what you showed here. So I guess that's a good thing. Right.
Yeah, but it was a really tiny project. I was a bit concerned that the teams would slow me down as well. But in my daily work, I'm never bothered by it.
Okay.
It takes a little longer to load a project, but when it's loaded, ReSharper has everything, as Ulrik said about nCrunch, everything is optimized for memory, and I don't know how it does it, but it does it well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any more questions from the attendees? Don't hesitate to write it in the chat. Let me just share here. Yeah. Okay. So I guess that was more or less it. That was the third and final event of the 3 being a Visual Studio Champ events. We have had a lot of great tips and tricks being shared, and the videos, the recordings from all 3 events are available. 2 of them are already available, and the final one here will be available shortly on Blue Fragment's website and on the YouTube channel. So please share your feedback. You will get a very short survey a little bit after the event here today. if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Kasper or Ulrik. And again, if you want to be part of the competition of winning the subscription from JetBrains, share your tip or your trick and send it to win@bluefragments.com by the end of tomorrow, and we will announce the winner on Friday. And it's of course in May and not in April as first written. So it's on Friday that we will announce the winner. We'll do that on LinkedIn, and we'll do it on Twitter. So there's a chance that everybody can know it.
Thomas?
So, yes.
Just
Kasper.
want to say that this .ultimate subscription, just to motivate people to chip in, consists of ReSharper, and it consists of Writer, which is an alternative to Visual Studio. Then it also contains a memory profiler and a tool called .cover, which is basically code test coverage tool, which is really awesome and adds a lot of features on the built-in code coverage tool. So it's a lot of good stuff in there just to motivate people to chip in.
Yep. Definitely. It is a really great sponsorship from JetBrains. So of course, a big thank you to them for that. All right. With that, I want to say again, thank you to our sponsors, Microsoft, Blue Fragments, and .NET Consultants. A big thank you to everybody who listened both to this event, to the previous events, and of course also a big thank you to you, Kasper, and to you, Ulrik, for sharing your tips and tricks here today. And finally, a big thank you to our moderators sitting behind the screen here, making everything possible. So with that, thank you so much, and have a great evening. Bye.